The mic is hot. Let's break this down. I need you to listen to me very carefully because what happened yesterday wasn't just financial news. It was a confession. Jerome Powell just looked into a camera and effectively told 350 million Americans, you are on your own. I know, you turn on CNBC, you open the Wall Street Journal, and what do you see? Fed cuts rates, market rallies, soft landing secured, green arrows, confetti. Everyone is popping champagne because money just got cheaper. A 25 basis point cut. We are down to 3.5%. Hooray, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. If you actually listened to the Q&A, and I know you have a life, so you probably didn't, which is why I'm here, you would have heard the quiet part out loud. Typically, you cut rates when the economy is crashing and inflation is gone. That's the rule. That is the only rule the Fed has. But look around you. Is inflation gone? Go to the grocery store. Look at the price of eggs. Look at your insurance premium. Look at the PIIE data that just dropped. Inflation isn't gone. It's accelerating. We're seeing a 0.9% spike just from these new tariffs alone. So ask yourself the question that nobody on cable news is asking. Why on earth would the Federal Reserve cut rates, which adds fuel to the fire, when inflation is already burning the house down? Because they surrendered. Powell explicitly said it. He separated demand inflation, the stuff they can control, from tariff inflation, the stuff they can't. He looked at the trade war, he looked at the supply chains snarling up, and he blinked. He decided that he would rather let your cost of living explode than risk crashing the stock market by keeping rates high. He is pre-insuring the banks against a recession, and he's paying for that insurance policy with your purchasing power. This is the pivot nobody wanted to admit was coming, the not our fault pivot. By cutting rates now into a rising inflation environment, the Fed is admitting that high prices are here to stay. They are telling you that 2% inflation is a fantasy. They are accepting 3, 4, maybe 5% as the cost of doing business in this new trade regime. And that changes everything. It changes how you save. It changes how you invest. It changes whether you can afford to retire. Because if the guy in charge of protecting the dollar just admitted he can't protect it from trade policy, who is protecting your savings? Nobody. This isn't just a rate cut, it's a signal that the adults have left the room and the printing press is the only tool they have left. Let me show you exactly what this surrender looks like in the numbers, because once you see this chart, you are never going to look at a dollar bill the same way again. To really understand how dangerous this moment is, we have to look at the old world. And I don't mean ancient history, I mean like 3 years ago. For the last 40 years, basically my entire adult life, and probably yours too, we lived under a very specific set of rules. It was the Volcker consensus. You remember Paul Volcker, giant guy, cigar smoker, ran the Fed in the 80s. He was the guy who taught central bankers that their only job, their only real job, was to kill inflation. It didn't matter if everyone hated you. It didn't matter if businesses went bust. It didn't matter if the president was screaming at you in the Oval Office. If prices went up, you raised rates until they stopped. You broke the back of inflation, even if you had to break the economy's legs to do it. That was the deal. We gave the Fed independence, and in exchange, they promised to protect the value of the money in your pocket. It was a social contract. You go to work, you earn $1, and that dollar buys roughly the same amount of bread next year. That world is gone. It didn't die of old age. It was murdered yesterday afternoon. Because what we saw on December 10th wasn't just a rate cut, it was the tearing up of that contract. Let's look at the timeline because the devil is in the details, and the mainstream press is too busy looking at stock tickers to read the fine print. Leading up to this meeting, the data was ugly. We knew it. You feel it every time you tap your card. The Consumer Price Index, the CPI, was creeping back up. We weren't at 2%. We were drifting north. 2.8%, 2.9%. In the old world, the Volcker world, that is a code red. That is when the Fed chairman comes out, looks stern, and says, "We are holding rates high until the job is done." But Powell didn't do that. He came out and cut rates to 3.5%. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I can hear the comments already. But wait, isn't a rate cut good? My credit card interest is killing me. I want to refinance my house. Why are you mad that money is getting cheaper? And listen, I get it. On the surface, it feels like relief. Who doesn't want lower payments? But you have to ask yourself, why is he cutting? He isn't cutting because he won the war. He's cutting because he changed the definition of the enemy. This is the catalyst. This is the moment the history books will point to. Powell stood there and made a distinction that sounds technical, but is actually terrifying. He separated inflation into two buckets. Bucket A is demand pull. That's when you and I have too much money and we're buying too many TVs, so prices go up. The Fed can fix that. They raise rates, we stop buying TVs, prices fall. But then he pointed to bucket B, cost push, specifically tariff-induced inflation. He looked at the new trade policies, the 10% here, the 20% there, the absolute wall of taxes being slapped on imports, and he essentially said, we can't fix the tariff price hike. And he's right. He's technically right. If the price of steel goes up because of a tariff, raising interest rates doesn't make the tariff go away. It just makes it harder for the steel mill to borrow money. But here is where the betrayal happens. In the old world, the Fed would have said, we don't care why prices are up. If they are up, we punish the economy until they come down. It was brutal, but it protected the currency. By cutting rates now, Powell is saying, since we can't fix the tariff price hike, we aren't even going to try. We're going to lower rates to keep people employed, and we're just going to let you eat the higher prices. He is choosing to save the job market by sacrificing the dollar. That is the shift. And the Peterson Institute, PIIE, they have the receipts. They ran the numbers. This isn't a rounding error. They're estimating that these new tariffs are adding somewhere between 0.5% and 0.9% to inflation. That is massive. That is the difference between stable prices and why can't I afford bacon. So think about the math here. We have a baseline inflation of maybe 2.5%, add the tariff tax of 0.9%, now you are running at 3.4 or 3.5% inflation. And the Fed, the only guys with a fire hose, just decided to lower the water pressure because they don't want to break the windows. This is the straw man argument they're going to feed you for the next 6 months. You're going to hear every politician and every pundit say, well, we had to cut rates to support the manufacturing boom. We had to cut rates to help the average American borrower. Don't buy it. Cheap money is not a gift when the cost of living is rising faster than your wages. It's a trap. It's the classic money illusion. They put a few extra bucks in your pocket with a rate cut, but they strip away the value of every single dollar you already saved with inflation. Imagine you're on a boat. The boat is taking on water. That's the tariff inflation. The captain, Jerome Powell, looks at the leak and says, well, I can't plug that hole. It's a policy hole, not my department. So what does he do? Does he try to bail water faster? No, he speeds the boat up. He cuts rates to make the engine run hotter. Sure, the boat is moving faster now. The GDP looks good. The stock market loves it. But the boat is sitting lower and lower in the water every single hour. This is the double whammy the PIIE warned us about. Negative supply shock. Because what they aren't telling you, what they are terrified to explain, is exactly how that adjustment happens. They want you to think it's a switch you flip, but it's not a switch. It's a grinder, and you are the meat. Because to get from global supply chain to domestic supply chain without exploding the currency requires a miracle that Jerome Powell knows he can't deliver. But he can't say that. So instead, he cuts rates, smiles at the reporters, and hopes you don't notice that he just handed the keys to the printing press over to the politicians. And if you think the prices at the store are bad now, wait until you see what happens when the market realizes that nobody is manning the brakes anymore. Let's dig into the mechanism because I want you to see exactly how this engine brakes. You need to understand the gears because when this thing snaps, you don't want to be standing in the splash zone. All right, pull up a chair. We need to nerd out for a minute, but I promise I'm not going to draw supply and demand curves on a chalkboard. I want to explain this in a way that makes you realize just how stuck they actually are. Imagine you are at a bar, a really rowdy, expensive bar. That's the U.S. economy. For the last few years, the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, has been the bouncer. His job is to keep the party from getting too crazy. If people start throwing money around too fast, inflation, he steps in, turns on the lights, and kicks people out, raises interest rates. It's a buzzkill, but it keeps the bar standing. Now, imagine a new guy walks into the bar. Let's call him the trade policy. And he doesn't care about the music or the drinks. He walks in and starts smashing bottles. He starts lighting the furniture on fire. That is what a tariff is. It is a supply shock. It destroys the stuff available or makes it way more expensive to get. So now the bar is on fire. Prices are spiking because the stuff is ruined. In the olden days, the bouncer, Powell, would have said, "Whoa, chaos, I'm kicking everyone out." He would have raised rates to stop the madness. But yesterday the bouncer looked at the fire, looked at the smashed bottles, shrugged, and said, "You know what? Free drinks for everyone." That is what a rate cut is in this environment. He's pouring gasoline, cheap money, onto a supply-side fire. And this is where the mechanism gets really, really dangerous, because economics isn't magic, it's plumbing. And right now, the pipes are flowing backwards. You have to understand the specific trap the Fed is in. It's a catch-22 from hell. On one hand, they have the demand mandate. They need to keep people employed. If they keep rates at 5% or 6% while tariffs are crushing businesses, companies will just fold. They won't be able to afford the higher cost of goods and the higher cost of loans. So, mass layoffs, recession, the hard landing. Powell looked at that door and said, "Nope, can't do that. It's an election cycle every cycle now. We can't have a depression." So he looked at the other door, the inflation door. If he cuts rates, he saves the companies. They can borrow cheap money to pay for those expensive tariffed goods. They keep hiring. The party keeps going. But, and here is the massive flashing red but, by making money cheap, he weakens the US dollar. Stay with me here. This is the domino that falls on your head. When the Fed cuts rates, holding US dollars becomes less attractive to big global investors. They take their money elsewhere, so the value of the dollar drops relative to other currencies. Now, think about what we just did. We just slapped tariffs on imports, making them more expensive, and simultaneously, we cut rates, making our currency weaker, which also makes imports more expensive. It's a double tap. You're paying more because of the tax, and you're paying more because your money is worth less. I know, it sounds crazy. You look at this and go, why would they do that? Do they want to destroy the currency? I wish I was making this up. I really do. I wish I could tell you there's a secret 4D chess move here where this ends with 2% inflation and a strong dollar. But there isn't. They are banking on the lag. They're hoping that the relief from the rate cut hits your wallet before the inflation from the weak dollar destroys it. It's a race. And historically, the inflation always wins that race. Let's go deeper into the feedback loop. This is the part that keeps me up at night. When you signal to the market, like Powell just did, that you will not fight cost-push inflation, you unlock a psychological demon called unanchored expectations. That sounds like a boring textbook term, but it's actually the scariest thing in economics. Anchored expectations is when you believe deep in your bones that prices will be stable, so you don't rush to buy a car today because you know it will cost the same next year. You save your money, you invest. The system works. Unanchored expectations is when you realize the bouncer has left the building. You realize that prices are only going up. The tariff is 10% today, maybe it's 20% next month. The dollar is down, it'll be lower next week. So what do? You stop saving, you start spending. You buy the car now, you buy the house now, you stock up on food now. And what happens when 350 million people rush to buy things before the price goes up? The price goes up. It creates the exact inflation they claimed they were managing. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And because the Fed has already cut rates, because they already used their ammunition, they have nothing left to stop it. They can't turn around in 3 months and hike rates back to 5% without looking like complete idiots and crashing the market they just tried to save. They burned the bridge behind them. And we haven't even talked about the bond market yet, the bond vigilantes. These are the guys who lend money to the U.S. government. They buy treasury bonds. For years, they bought those bonds because they trusted the Fed to keep inflation low. If I lend you money for 10 years, I need to know that money will still buy a loaf of bread when you pay me back. Yesterday, Powell told those lenders, we are going to let inflation run hot because we can't fix the tariffs. If you are a lender, what do? You demand a higher interest rate to cover that risk. So, ironically, even though the Fed cut the short-term rate, the long-term rates, the ones that determine your mortgage, your car loan, the national debt interest, those might actually go up. We could end up in the worst of all possible worlds. The Fed rate is low, so savers get paid nothing, but the market rate is high, so borrowers pay a fortune, and prices are soaring because of the tariffs and the weak dollar. That is the stagflation trap. It's like being in a room where the heater is broken, low growth, but the walls are on fire, high inflation, and the guy with the fire extinguisher just walked out to get a sandwich. You have to realize that this wasn't an accident. Powell isn't stupid. The PhDs at the Fed aren't stupid. They know this model. They have the PIIE data we do. They see the 0.9% tariff spike. They see the supply shock.
So why do it? Why take this risk? Because the alternative was a recession in an election cycle or a politically volatile cycle. They chose the inflation tax over the bankruptcy event. They decided it is better to slowly bleed your savings account dry through higher prices than to let the stock market crash by 20%. They chose Wall Street over Main Street. Again. But this time, the mechanism is different. It's not just money printing. It's policy accommodation of a supply shock. That's the technical term. The translation is, the government breaks your legs with tariffs, and the Fed hands you a crutch made of cheap plastic and calls it a stimulus. And the craziest part? We haven't even hit the point of no return yet. That comes next. That comes when the rest of the world realizes what just happened. Because if the US dollar is no longer being defended by the Fed, if the US is openly embracing a weak dollar high tariff strategy, what do China, Europe, and the BRICS nations do? They don't just sit there. They retaliate. They dump. They move. We are standing on the edge of a cliff, and the Fed just greased the wheels. So what does that world look like? What happens when this domino chain actually hits the ground? Because if you think 2022 inflation was bad, you haven't seen anything yet. 2022 was a supply chain snarl. This is a policy war, and you are the collateral damage. Let's talk about the fallout. Let's talk about 2030, because the world I see coming is not the one they are promising you on TV. So where do we go from here? If the Fed has surrendered and the tariff war is just heating up, what does the movie look like when the credits roll? I want to be dead honest with you. I'm not here to sell you a bunker. I'm not here to tell you the world ends next Tuesday. But I am here to tell you that the world you grew up in, the world of cheap goods, easy credit, and a dollar that ruled the planet, is in the rearview mirror. We are looking at two scenarios. There's the fairy tale scenario. This is what they will tell you on the nightly news. In this version, the rate cut works perfectly. American businesses use that cheap money to build shiny new factories in Ohio and Michigan. We stop buying stuff from overseas, we make it all here, and after a brief transition period of high prices, everything settles down. We become an industrial superpower again, wages go up, and we all drive American-made cars into the sunset. I want to believe that. I really do. I love this country. But I look at the math, and the math says no. The ugly truth is what happens when you try to rebuild an industrial base overnight while devaluing your currency. It's messy. Here is the likely path, the path the PIIE data points to. First, the sugar high. For the next few months, things might actually feel okay. The stock market will probably pump because, hey, free money. The corporate media will take victory laps. See, the Fed pivoted, the recession is canceled. But while the stock market goes up, the real economy starts to rot. Imported goods, electronics, clothes, car parts jump in price because of the tariffs. That's step one. But then domestic producers, the guys making stuff here, look at those high import prices and say, hey, if the Chinese widget costs $20 now, I don't need to sell mine for $10. I can sell mine for $18 and still be the cheaper option.
That is called opportunistic inflation. Domestic companies will raise their prices to match the tariffed goods. They will pad their margins. And why wouldn't they? The Fed just told them they aren't going to fight it. So you get hit from both sides. Imports go up, American goods go up, and then comes the kicker, the bond market revolt. Remember those lenders we talked about? Eventually, they stop buying our debt at 4%. They demand 6%, 7%. Mortgage rates, which are tied to bonds, not the Fed rate, start to climb back up. So we end up in a world where the Fed rate is low, but your mortgage is high, where the stock market is at an all-time high, but a bag of groceries costs $150. That is the Brazilification of the U.S. economy. A tiny elite at the top who own assets get richer because the stock market tracks inflation. The bottom 80%, the people who work for wages, get crushed because their paycheck can't keep up with the price of milk. Let's fast forward. Let's look at 2030. If this trajectory holds, if the not our fault Fed becomes the permanent standard, what does your life look like in 5 years? It's a world of subscription feudalism. You won't own things, you will rent them, because buying a car outright will be too expensive due to the tariff-inflated parts and the weak dollar. So you'll lease everything. You'll subscribe to your car. You'll subscribe to your appliances. The dollar will still be used, sure, it's not going to disappear, but it will be a hot potato. You won't want to hold it. You get paid and you immediately spend it or invest it, because holding cash is a guaranteed loss. And the shelves? They won't be empty like the Soviet Union. We aren't going there. But they will be thinner. You know how you used to have 50 choices of cereal? Maybe you have 5, and 3 of them are generic. The era of infinite variety delivered to your door in 2 hours for free, that ends when the global trade system fractures. It's a harder, grittier economy. It's an economy where do you have skills matters more than do you have a degree. So what do? I'm dropping the analyst voice now. I'm talking to you like we're sitting at a kitchen table. I don't want you to panic. Panic is expensive. Panic makes you do stupid things like sell your 401k at the bottom or buy gold from a scammer on TV. I want you to prepare. Here is the survival guide for the Fed's surrender. Number 1, get out of the variable trap. If you have credit card debt, if you have a variable rate line of credit, kill it. Kill it now. Do whatever you have to do. Sell the extra car, pick up a second gig, because if the bond vigilantes wake up and push market rates to 8% or 9%, those variable rates are going to strangle you. The Fed cut rates for banks, not for you. Your credit card rate isn't going down. Get to safety. Number 2, the hard asset mindset. In a world where the central bank is devaluing the paper currency to save the system, you cannot store your life energy in paper. You need to own things that cannot be printed. I'm not telling you to go all in on crypto or gold. I'm not a financial advisor. But look at history. When currencies weaken, what holds value? Land, commodities, profitable businesses, stocks, precious metals, Bitcoin. You need to have some part of your net worth outside the banking system. Think of it as insurance. If the dollar loses 10% a year, holding gold or land is just swimming upstream. It's not about getting rich, it's about not drowning.
Number 3, become anti-fragile. This is the big one. In a stagflationary world, the most dangerous thing you can be is useless. If your job is pushing paper in a middle management role that can be replaced by AI or outsourced, you are in the blast zone. The winners in the next 5 years will be the people who can actually do things, fix things, build things, solve complex problems. Invest in yourself, learn a trade, learn a hard skill. Can you fix a heat pump? Can you code a local LLM? Can you grow food? I know grow food sounds like prepper talk, but have you seen produce prices lately? A garden is a money printer in 2030. Your ability to generate value is the only hedge against inflation that can't be taxed away or inflated away.
Number 4, ignore the noise. This is the hardest part. The media is going to gaslight you. They're going to tell you the economy is booming while your rent goes up 20%. They are going to tell you that inflation is cooling because it went from 9% to 8%. Don't let them make you feel crazy. Trust your own eyes. Trust your own receipt. If the news says the economy is great, but your neighborhood is struggling, believe your neighborhood. The official narrative is now decoupled from reality. Powell proved that yesterday. He is managing the optics, not the price of your groceries. We are entering a new era, the era of the political Fed, the era where the currency is a tool for trade war, not a store of value. It's scary, I won't lie. It feels like the ground is shifting. But here's the good news. Americans are scrappy. We are resilient. The government might be broken, the central bank might be compromised, but the people? We figure it out. We always do. You now have the information. You know the game is rigged. You know the Fed has folded. You know the soft landing is a myth. That knowledge is your edge. While everyone else is celebrating the rate cut party, you're going to be quietly fortifying your castle. You're going to be paying down debt, buying hard assets, and learning new skills. And when the bill for this surrender finally comes due, you're not the one paying it. Stay sharp, stay skeptical, and watch your wallet because nobody else is watching it for you. I'll see you in the next one.